WrestleMania 40 has officially come and gone, but that doesn't mean we can't keep making videos about it. That's right, we're going to keep milking this cow. To put it simply, WrestleMania 40 was awesome. So awesome, in fact, that everyone is already considering it one of, if not the, greatest WrestleMania of all time. However, if we look back just last year at WrestleMania 39, if it wasn't for the finish, a lot of people were saying that was one of the best WrestleManias of all time too. But which one is the best? That is what we are going to be breaking down today. WrestleMania 39 versus WrestleMania 40. Each WrestleMania had 13 official matches on their cards. So what I decided to do is to pit similar matches against each other on a one-to-one basis. For example, the United States title. At WrestleMania 39, the US title match was Austin Theory versus John Cena. At WrestleMania 40, it was Logan Paul versus Kevin Owens versus Randy Orton. I'll compare both matches, select a winner, and then award 1 point to that WrestleMania. We'll do this for all 13 matches. Admittedly, some of them are more similar than others on a one-to-one basis. And then I have a few bonus categories we'll get to at the end that'll each be worth half a point. Whichever WrestleMania ends up with more points overall is the winner. Feel free to play along and let me know your winners in the comments. Let's get started. So as previously mentioned, our first category is going to be the United States title match. WrestleMania 39, it was John Cena versus Austin Theory, and at WrestleMania 40, it was Logan Paul versus Kevin Owens versus Randy Orton. And I'm going to make this one very simple, because John Cena versus Austin Theory was one of the more disappointing PLE matches I've seen in recent years. Most of that was unfortunately due to John Cena and his lack of physicality, as well as Austin Theory not quite being engaging enough. It was a bit of an uneventful slog to get through, and it really wasn't the best way to open WrestleMania 39. However, the triple threat at WrestleMania 40 is a far superior match. KO, Randy Orton, and Logan Paul, they're three of the best wrestlers working today. It was entertaining, it was fast moving, it was comedic. From an in-ring standpoint, it far exceeded what Austin Theory and John Cena did the year prior. So to me, this is an easy win for WrestleMania 40. Alright, moving on to the Intercontinental title match at both WrestleManias. At WrestleMania 39, it was Gunther versus Drew McIntyre versus Sheamus in a triple threat. And at WrestleMania 40, it was Gunther versus Sami Zayn. What's insane to think about is that both of these matches occurred during the same reign. And when you're looking at both of these matches, this is a tough one. Both matches are not only considered the best of each of their WrestleManias, but also the best of each of their years thus far. Because from a story perspective, it's definitely Gunther versus Sami Zayn. Sami is an excellent storyteller, and his take on Rocky Balboa, I thought it worked wonderfully. And Gunther versus Sami, from an in-ring standpoint, was easily the best match of WrestleMania 40. However, when you compare the sheer awesomeness that was Gunther versus Sheamus versus Drew, big meaty men slapping man meat, it's arguably one of the best WWE matches ever, and I also just find it immensely rewatchable. It's only 17 minutes long, and it's just relentless. So because of that, I have to give the win to the triple threat. Point to WrestleMania 39. Alright, moving on to the men's tag team title match. At WrestleMania 39, it was Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens versus the Usos, and at WrestleMania 40, it was the six-pack ladder match. And listen, I loved the six-pack ladder match. I thought it was a blast. I was there watching it live, and the crowd erupted for R-Truth whenever he did anything, even though it was freezing cold, even though the crowd was mostly dead on night one. For basically all of the matches, they came alive for R-Truth. To see him have his WrestleMania moment was just awesome. And from an in-ring standpoint, it was just insane. There were so many crazy spots, a lot of flips, a lot of hard crashes. It succeeded at what it was trying to do. It was chaotic, it was hilarious, and at the end of the day, it was pure sports entertainment. But this is no question. Sami Zayn and KO versus the Usos, it was arguably the match of WrestleMania 39, and in my opinion is one of the best tag matches ever. There's a reason Dave Meltzer gave it a 5-star rating. Point to WrestleMania 39. Alright, moving on to the women's title matches. First, it's going to be the SmackDown or Women's World Championship match. At WrestleMania 39, it was Charlotte Flair versus Rhea Ripley for the SmackDown Women's Championship, and at WrestleMania 40, it was Rhea Ripley defending that same title, now called the Women's World Championship, against Becky Lynch. And similar to the men's tag match, this is no question. Charlotte Flair versus Rhea Ripley is one of the best wrestling matches that I've ever seen. In my opinion, it's actually better than Sami and KO versus the Usos and the IC triple threat from a purely in-ring standpoint, because obviously the story between Charlotte and Rhea leading into the match wasn't very good. In my opinion, it's the best women's match I've ever seen. I've rewatched it multiple times now, and honestly, it gets better each time. It's just incredible. Becky versus Rhea was a solid match, albeit a bit disappointing, mainly because the crowd was dead and they weren't rooting for Becky Lynch, which was weird because she was the babyface in this situation. But also after rewatching the match, it's solid, don't get me wrong, but it just doesn't hold a candle to Charlotte versus Rhea. Point to WrestleMania 39. Moving on to the second women's title match, it's going to be the Raw or WWE Women's title match. At WrestleMania 39, it was Bianca Belair versus Asuka for the Raw Women's Championship, and at WrestleMania 40, it was Io Sky versus Bayley for the WWE Women's Championship. And this one is also super easy. Bayley versus Io was awesome. I got a lot of flack on my WrestleMania 40 ranked video for putting it at number 8. After rewatching the match a few times, I would probably bump it up to at least number 5 or 6. When I was watching Bayley versus Io live in person, something about it just didn't click with me for whatever reason. Maybe it was because I was just waiting with bated breath for the main event, and because of that I could not mentally focus on Bayley versus Io while I was in the stadium. From an in-ring standpoint, I think it's a little bit better than Bianca versus Asuka, but from a story and emotional standpoint, it is leagues above Bianca versus Asuka. Bianca versus Asuka is a good match, don't get me wrong. It's a solid 3.5 out of 5. But when you compare it to Bianca's other WrestleMania matches, where in my opinion, she stole the show, it doesn't quite hold up. Bianca Belair, for my money, is the best women's superstar on the roster today. She stole the show at WrestleMania 37 with Sasha Banks, and then she stole the show again at WrestleMania 38 with Becky Lynch. But Bianca versus Asuka just didn't quite hit the same, so I'm going to give the point to Bayley versus Io, WrestleMania 40. Alright, and the final title match category will be for the WWE Championship. At WrestleMania 39, it was Roman Reigns versus Cody Rhodes for both the WWE Championship and the Universal Championship. The belts were unified at that time, but one singular belt had not been created. And at WrestleMania 40, it's Roman Reigns versus Cody Rhodes again for the WWE Undisputed Universal Championship. And here's the thing. From an in-ring standpoint, actual wrestling, I think WrestleMania 39 takes the edge. But let's be honest, their match at WrestleMania 40 was just cinema. The Avengers Endgame of WrestleMania main events. One of the greatest main events, if not the greatest main event of all time. From a technical standpoint, is it up there with Kurt Angle versus Shawn Michaels versus The Undertaker, Brett versus Owen Hart? No, of course not, but it's not trying to be. It's one of the most fun moments in wrestling history, one of the biggest pops in wrestling history for everyone that came out, and the ending ties it all together with a nice bow. The story has been finished. Let's not kid ourselves. It's a point for WrestleMania 40. Alright, so we're done with the title matches, but now we're going to move on to the matches that are very similar on a one-to-one basis. For example, this next category, the Damage Control Tag Match. At WrestleMania 39, Damage Control, consisting of Bayley, Dakota Kai, and Io Sky, took on 3 of the greatest women to ever do it, Becky Lynch, Trish Stratus, and Lita. And at WrestleMania 40, the new version of Damage Control, consisting of Dakota Kai, Asuka, and Kairi Sane, took on Bianca Belair, Jade Cargill, and Naomi. And this is a tough one because I don't particularly like either match, but I do think overall they're fine. They fulfill their basic need of getting the women on the card. And I don't know if it's recency bias, but I do think the WrestleMania 40 tag match has a bit of an edge, just from an entertainment standpoint. And from a rewatchability standpoint, I've never even thought about going back to rewatch WrestleMania 39's tag match, whereas I could see myself maybe skimming through the highlights of this match. Then again, during WrestleMania 39, Damage Control was more of a threat at that point. A lot of people did think they were going to win that match because if they beat Becky, Trish, and Lita, it would really have cemented them as a dominant faction. Going into WrestleMania 40, there was no confusion. It was the most predictable match on the entire card. We knew who was going to win. But that being said, I still think it was just a hair more entertaining, mainly because of Bianca Belair just doing her thing, and also the novelty of it all with Jade Cargill's in-ring debut in an actual traditional match. I'm going to go with the WrestleMania 40 match because I think it succeeds more at what it was trying to do, which is to be a showcase match for your company's top women and to be a strong debut for Jade Cargill. So I'm going to give the point to WrestleMania 40, but it's a bit of a toss-up because, again, I don't really like either. All right, next category is going to be the Seth Rollins match. At WrestleMania 39, he took on Logan Paul in a singles match, and at WrestleMania 40, he took on Drew McIntyre to defend the World Heavyweight title, something that didn't even exist during the time of WrestleMania 39. And this one, honestly, for me, isn't that tough at all, because Seth Rollins versus Logan Paul, I think, was a freaking awesome match. From an in-ring standpoint, I thought it was way more entertaining, a lot more things going on, whereas Seth versus Drew was good, it was solid, but I don't think it holds a candle to Seth versus Drew at Crown Jewel. I loved the ending with CM Punk getting involved and Damian Priest cashing in, which I do consider a part of this overall match, but whether you're including the cash-in or not, I don't think Seth versus Drew at WrestleMania 40 holds a candle to Seth versus Logan Paul. I'm sorry. It's just the better match, plain and simple. Point to WrestleMania 39. Next up is going to be the Rey versus Dom match. At WrestleMania 39, it was Rey versus Dom in a singles match, and at WrestleMania 40, it was Rey and Andrade versus Dom and Santos. And this is another very easy one. Rey versus Dominic at WrestleMania 39 was awesome. It was entertaining, it was fun, it was hilarious. Whereas when you look at WrestleMania 40, it felt kind of thrown together. Dominic did not get involved into the Santos LWO storyline until only a few weeks before WrestleMania, which really makes you think, oh, they just didn't have anything else for Dominic Mysterio to do at WrestleMania 40, so let's just throw him back in with Rey for a couple weeks. And hey, I'm not complaining because Rey versus Dominic will never not be entertaining. But if you're looking at both matches, which one's better, to me, it's no question. It's Rey versus Dominic at WrestleMania 39. All right, we have 4 matches left from each card, and admittedly, they're not very similar on a one-to-one basis, but I did my best to match up similar matches. Anyway, our first category is going to be the non-title men's tag match. At WrestleMania 39, there was a men's tag team showcase, and at WrestleMania 40, it was The Rock and Roman Reigns versus Seth Rollins and Cody Rhodes. And listen, credit where credit's due, the men's tag team showcase at WrestleMania 39 probably should have been the opening match. It was a pure blast from start to finish. But that being said, The Rock and Roman versus Cody and Seth is just another level. And while the match started off slow, by the time you got to the final 10 minutes, it was just intense, and when Roman accidentally spears The Rock, that was the biggest pop of night one. So again, I know these matches aren't entirely similar, but I need to pick a winner just to keep this dumb little game going. So I'm going point for WrestleMania 40 here. Next category is what I'm going to be calling the lowest rated match. Coming off of WrestleMania 39, the match that was rated the lowest, whether it be by Dave Meltzer or really just fans in general, was the Women's Tag Team Showcase. Coming off of this year's WrestleMania, the match that was rated the lowest was Jimmy versus Jey Uso. So comparing these two matches, which bottom of the barrel match was better? And for me, this is no question, it's Jimmy versus Jey, because the Women's Tag Team Showcase was just a mess. It's just noise. It was an excuse to get everyone on the card. They threw together random tag teams like Natalya and Shotzi or Liv and Raquel. And then the actual tag team that you wanted to see compete, Ronda and Shayna, really didn't do anything at all because I believe Ronda was nursing an injury at the time. It was just a mess. It did not deserve to be on the WrestleMania card. Whereas Jimmy versus Jey, while disappointing, is still a fine match in my opinion. Jey Uso is able to work the crowd on a level similar to R-Truth, where he's just so entertaining to watch. Yes, it was just a super kick fest, but it was perfectly watchable and harmless. So I'm going to give the point to WrestleMania 40. Alright, 2 categories left for official matches. The first one is going to be the Gimmick Grudge Match. This category is based around a feud that had been going on for a while, and both participants realized the only way to properly end the feud was to introduce a gimmick. At WrestleMania 39, it was Edge versus Demon Finn Balor in Hell in a Cell, and at WrestleMania 40, it was The Pride versus Final Testament in a Philadelphia street fight. And for me, this is pretty easily going to be Edge versus Demon Finn. I like the Hell in a Cell gimmick, and I think it works for both characters. There were ladders everywhere, there were colored kendo sticks. Finn Balor got hit with a ladder at one point and had to pause the match so he could get staples in his head, and because of that, Edge had to walk around confused trying to keep the crowd interested. It was a hot mess, but it was fun to watch. Pride versus Final Testament was a feud that I did not care about at all, and the match was fine, but to me it was the weakest match of the entire card, although I did respect the athleticism from all involved. I'm going WrestleMania 39. And the last category, very simply, is going to be the non-title singles match. WrestleMania 39, it was Brock Lesnar versus Omos, and at WrestleMania 40, it was LA Knight versus AJ Styles. And listen, I think both of these matches were fairly successful at what they were trying to be. Brock versus Omos was basically an excuse to see, can Brock Lesnar lift up Omos? And LA Knight versus AJ Styles was just a way to get LA Knight on the card, get a good win, just to cement his popularity even further. But from a rewatchability standpoint and just an overall entertainment standpoint, LA Knight versus AJ Styles easily gets the win here because, again, Brock versus Omos was just about getting Brock to lift him up and give him an F5. There's really nothing to it. LA Knight versus AJ Styles, there's a bit more meat to chew on. So, point to WrestleMania 40. Alright, we are done comparing both matches, 13 on each card. WrestleMania 40 is in the lead with 7, WrestleMania 39 at 6. But we have a few more bonus categories that will each be worth half a point. They're not quite as important as the actual matches of WrestleMania, but I still think they make up the overall experience. Like this one, Best Stage. They call it the grandest stage of them all for a reason. And when you're looking at which WrestleMania had the better stage, to me, it's no question WrestleMania 39. This stage was awesome. WrestleMania XL, it did its job. Come on, the WrestleMania 39 stage is one of the best ever. It's not quite on the WrestleMania 33 level, WrestleMania 30 level, but it's up there. Point to WrestleMania 39. Next up is going to be theme song. Whether it's My Way by Limp Bizkit, Invincible by Machine Gun Kelly, the WrestleMania theme song plays an important role because when you hear the song, you think of that WrestleMania. At WrestleMania 39, it was Less Than Zero by The Weeknd, and at WrestleMania 40, it was Gasoline by The Weeknd. Clearly, WWE has some type of deal going with The Weeknd where they're just going through his most recent album and picking all of his songs to be WrestleMania's theme songs. It's been going on 5 years in a row now. I hope that next year they're able to branch out and choose any other artist. But when you're comparing both of these songs, to me, it's easily Less Than Zero. That song is awesome, and when you hear it, it just feels like a WrestleMania song, whereas Gasoline, it just doesn't. It feels like they were really kind of just choosing a random song from that album and said, oh, we didn't use this one yet. Point to WrestleMania 39. All right, we have 3 more bonus categories, and the next one is crowd. Which WrestleMania had the better crowd? And this one's pretty easy too, because WrestleMania 39 had a very upbeat crowd across both nights, whereas WrestleMania 40 had a completely dead crowd on night 1 because of the weather. I was there, we were freezing. And then on night 2, it had one of the best crowds ever. I think Philly really redeemed itself. I, for one, definitely tried harder. And I think we were able to deliver an awesome, iconic crowd for WrestleMania 40 Night 2. But given the fact that on Night 1 we were so dead, the point has to go to WrestleMania 39 here, because in wrestling, the crowd plays such an important role. If the crowd isn't into it, it just makes everything else feel awkward and look not as cool. So just because of the consistency, I have to go WrestleMania 39. Next up is going to be the match build. This admittedly is not a part of WrestleMania itself, but more so the runway leading into it. When I say match build, I mean when you look at the overall landscape of matches across both WrestleManias, which stories were you more invested in going into WrestleMania? How much did you care about the matches you were paying to see? And when you look at WrestleMania 39, there were some great stories. Cody versus Roman, Sami and KO versus the Usos, Rey Rey versus Dominic. I really enjoyed the program between Seth and Logan, but there were also a lot of very disappointing builds, mainly in the women's division. Charlotte versus Rhea and Bianca versus Asuka, in my opinion, had terrible builds. There's a reason why Charlotte and Rhea weren't chosen as the main event, even though at the time of the Royal Rumble, they were the de facto main event. And that's because their story just wasn't that good compared to Sami and KO versus the Usos. But when you're looking at WrestleMania 40, in my opinion, it was mostly great builds. Cody versus Roman, Seth versus Drew, Bayley versus Io, R-Truth versus the Judgment Day for the tag team titles. Even ones that didn't quite live up to expectations, like the storyline between Rhea and Becky, or in my opinion, LA Knight versus AJ Styles, they were still entertaining enough, and they weren't just downright awful. So because of that, when you're looking at the totality of match builds and the emotional investment we all had going into each show, you gotta give the point to WrestleMania 40. And the last category is WrestleMania Moments. You might have heard this phrase a lot, but WrestleMania is all about the moments. And I'm not just talking about who wins each match, but we're talking surprise matches, celebrity appearances, moments that can only happen at WrestleMania. When you look at the WrestleMania moments from 39, you had The Miz versus Pat McAfee and George Kittle. You had The Miz and Snoop Dogg versus Shane McMahon. But you also had some surprise appearances from Bad Bunny. When you look at WrestleMania 40, Damian Priest's cash-in, it was insane on a whole nother level. Apart from that, you had Jason Kelsey interfere with the Ray match. Bubba Ray Dudley was a guest referee for the Philadelphia Street Fight. CM Punk's involvement with Seth versus Drew. And of course, the main event. John Cena, The Rock, The Undertaker. This point goes to WrestleMania 40. It was one of the greatest WrestleMania moments of all time. So with that, our final score is WrestleMania 39, 7.5, and for the victory, WrestleMania 40 with 8. WrestleMania 40 takes the cake. What do you think though? WrestleMania 39 or WrestleMania 40? Which one was better? Let me know in the comments below. Bye bye.